Well, hey everybody, I've just been putting away the yacht after our yacht racing that we've been doing while we've been away. You can look at one of my previous videos and you can see what we've been up to. The radio I've been using, the Radio Master TX16S. It's a really good radio. It's not that expensive, but in addition it runs OpenTX, or I've updated that to EdgeTX, and it is so programmable. Like most people that get these, you just get your models working and flying or boating or whatever you do without really realizing the full power of what it can do. So I'm going to show you a little trick today. So the challenge that I set myself is to create a yacht racing start and race timer. So the way we've been racing those yachts is we'd have a 3-minute starting period, then the siren would blow. Anyone that was over the start line at that time had to turn around and go around again. And then the race would run for 15 minutes, and whatever lap you're on when the 15-minute timer goes off, you finish that lap and then the winner's declared. The start of the yacht race is the best. With jostling for position, trying to get right of way over the other yacht and not cross the line before the timer goes off.
14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Timer 1 elapsed.
What a start. The last thing that I wanted to do when I was crossing that start line is to think, oh, I need to start a second timer for the race. I wanted a 3-minute start timer, a 15-minute race timer. I wanted sirens or a horn to start the timers, to little sound to end, and then of course I wanted a horn when the winning yacht went over, all on one switch. So that's the challenge. I didn't really know how to do it, but I knew that this radio was so programmable that there's got to be some way in there. So I started my research, I asked a few questions, and I found the answer, and the answer is using what's called logical switches. Let me show you what I did from beginning to end, how to set up a yacht race start timer on the Radio Master TX16S.
Welcome to OpenTX.
So here's the model that I've got set up for the yacht. On the right here I have my throttle, which I've set to the sheet, and on the left this stick is simply the rudder. Yacht only needs 2 channels. I'm a mode 1 flyer, so all my models have throttle on the right, so it just makes sense to put that as the sheet. It means I can leave it wherever I want it. Now, in order to set up this cool timer arrangement, we need to get into the model settings and set up a couple of timers. So timer 1, we're going to call this first timer start. And we want that timer to come on. And the switch that I'm going to use is this one up here. So we want it to come on when I pull that all the way forward. Switch G, select that. Our start is going to last for 3 minutes. We want a minute call as it counts down. So 2 minutes left, 1 minute left. We want a voice to have a 30-second countdown at the very end, and we don't want that to be a persistent timer. We want it just to be used for this model for this time. So I can turn that off. Now our second timer, this is going to be our race timer. So race, and we want that timer to be on. We're not going to designate a switch for it because we don't want that to start with a physical switch. We want that to start with a signal or some measure that tells us when the start time is finished. We want to race for 15 minutes.
Timer 2 elapsed.
And we want a minute call on that. We want it to be also to have a 30-second countdown at the end, and we don't want that to be persistent either. Now, the way that I did it initially is to have the first timer in this position, and so when the first timer counted down, then I'd start the second timer by bringing it to the forward position. But as I'm starting the race, with the countdown, we're jostling for position, the last thing I want to have to remember as I cross the finish line is to switch the next timer on. So we need a way of being able to trigger the second timer when the first timer is complete. And the way we do that is with logical switches. And logical switch is this icon here, and you can see there's a list. We want to create one. Now, first of all, look at this. It's just kind of weird and what all the things mean. Well, V1 and V2 are the two things that we're comparing. So let's have a look, which function shall we use to compare? A equals X, so that A is some value out of the radio itself, and X is just some number that you put in. We want the second timer to be running whenever the first timer is less than 3 minutes. If we make it run when the timer is equal to 3 minutes, then it will only run for that split second. We want it to be always running when it is less than 0, when the first timer comes down to less than 0. So we'll go A is less than X. What's our A value going to be? A is the timer, the start timer, there it is there, and we want it to be less than 0, and 0 is already in there. So whenever the start timer is less than 0, this logical switch, LO1, will be switched on. Remember, it's not a physical switch, it's just an imaginary switch that we can create. Now we can go back and use that switch, there it is there, back in our timer. So if we go back to our model settings, now there's timer 1, that's the start. Timer 2, we want that to start when our LO1, logical switch 1, is turned on. See, there's a second icon there. Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. The second icon there gets us to logical switches, and LO1, there's our logical switch that we're using. Now, hopefully all's well. The first timer will count down from 3 down to 0, and that will trigger the second timer, and we should be good to go. Now, to make sure that we can see what we're doing, we want to put these timers on the screen here. So that's just a matter of setting up some widgets. Click the bottom left, go to the setup widgets part. There's the 2 widgets I want put in there. The first one will be timer 1, there it is. The second one will be timer 2, and there it is. Now you can see there at random times. We want to now go and put on our switch a way of resetting those. So that's a matter of getting in. We want to set the first one to 3 minutes and the second one to 15 minutes. That's our starting position. So let's go, I'm still in the widget mode. We'll get out of widget mode. And then let's go into model settings and set a special function which will enable us to reset the timer when the switch is pushed away from us. So the switch we're going to use is switch G away from us. That little beeper that goes on there, that's a global function I've got set across all my models because that's the switch I use for arming. And it makes sense, you know, you don't arm a yacht, but you can arm the race, so to speak. And when the switch goes away, that little beep is a sign that everything's safe with a quad or a plane or something like that. So what do we want that switch to do? Well, we forgot to select it. Let's try it again. We want to set timer 1 to 3 minutes. And enable that. Now create another one on the same switch. We want to set timer 2 to 15 minutes. And enable that. And back we go. So there they all are. So when I put the switch away from me, that should set both the timers to their original positions, and there you can see 3 minutes start, race 15 minutes. That's exactly what we want. And then when I pull the switch towards us, the timer starts. But it's fairly silent beginning of the race. Let's try putting some sounds in here to make it sound much better. That should reset, and it does. Okay, so when we start, we want to hear a horn, and we want to hear it say the time, how much time there is left to go before the start. Let's get into our special functions. So we're going to add a special function here when we start the timer. Switch G. We want to play a track. Now I went onto the internet to find the best air horn sound that I could find, and I did, and I downloaded it and trimmed it using Audacity, and then out of Audacity I exported it into a format that the EdgeTX or OpenTX can handle. And what you have to do is you have to downsample it to 32 kilohertz or less, 16 bits or less, and give it a name that ends in .wav, so you export it as a WAV file. And the file name can't have any more than 6 letters in it. And there's all sorts of info on the web on how to do that. Then I copied it onto the SD card of my radio into the sounds/EN for English directory, and you can hear the time is still going. I'll stop that. And then then it appears in this list of tracks that you can play. So we'll put it in there. So when the switch comes forward, it plays the track, and that track is a horn. But we also want it to tell us how long there is left to go. So I shall put in another one. When the switch is forward, listen for the sound. What a great air horn sound. Now with this switch here, we want it to play the value of timer 1, which in our case is called start. There it is there. So let's get out of there now. So reset, listen for the start.
3 minutes.
That's pretty good. That's how I want the start. Now when that gets down to 0, the actual start of the race happens. I want to hear that horn again, and we've already got this one triggered to start as well, and that's on the logical switch. So I'm going to put in another special function for this model that will play that horn again, but this time it's when our logical switch is triggered. And that logical switch means the end of the first 3-minute timer and the beginning of the race. So we're going to play a track, and that track is going to be the horn sound again. So our timer's going, which is good, because that means we'll be able to check to make sure it all works when it gets down to 0. So I'll just pause it here until we're in our 30-second countdown.
19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Timer 1 elapsed.
So there you have it, the yachts are racing now. I would love to get rid of the sound that says timer 1 elapsed. I don't know how to do that apart from deleting that sound file off my SD card, which I don't want to do because other models may and do want to use that sound. So I'm open for suggestions on how to get rid of that, because I just love the horn on its own, but nonetheless it's quite functional and does the job that we're looking for. Now we also want to have a little sound at the end when the race timer goes off. A little sound to remind us that it's only 1 lap to go, because when that race timer finishes, it's the first one over the finish line, assuming we're both on the same lap, who wins the race. So let's go in and set up another logical switch that is triggered
14 minutes.
when that timer elapses. I'll keep that timer running because it'll be a quicker time to be able to show you what happens when it finishes. So back into logical switches, we're going to create another one. This time it's when the timer equals 0. So the first one that we want to equal is the timer, the race timer, and we want that to equal 0. Simple as that. There's our logical switch number 2. Go back to special functions, and we want to create a function where that logical switch, remember it's the second icon down there, logical switch 2 is there. We want to play a sound, and I kind of like the sound of the siren. I think
13 minutes.
I think that's kind of a cool little sound, so we'll do that. Then when the 15 minutes is up, it should play that little siren sound. While we're doing that, I also want to set up, while we're waiting for that timer to count down, also want to set up a sound for when the winning boat goes across the finish line, that it also blows a horn, and we can't, the radio doesn't know when a boat crosses the finish line, so we're going to have to put that on a second switch. So if I happen to win, or the person I'm racing against happens to win, as soon as that boat crosses the line, I just need to pull that switch, and I'm probably going to put it on this switch back here. So
12 minutes.
Back into model settings, it's simply a matter of making another special function. The switch we're going to use is this one back here, SF1, and we want it to play a track, and we'll get out the good old horn sound again. The touch screen's a bit fiddly, but it is, I like using it better than the scroll wheel. There it is. So let's give it a try. Somehow it's got itself onto the wrong switch. SF1.
11 minutes.
Better. That's better. So now the horn is on that switch for when the first boat finishes. There's something else really cool that I want to do. Let me show you. We'll put it on the same switch, the same event. So first thing the horn blows, then put it on the same switch, and this time we want some background music, and I've got hold of a song. I've gone into Audacity and I've downsampled it to 32K and changed it from stereo to mono and trimmed it to just how I want it, and it's in here as song number 5.wave. Let
10
me
minutes.
show you what it's going to do. There it is, song 5. We'll back right out of it now. Now the winning boat goes across the finish line. All I need to do is pull that. That's going to be pretty cool. And all you need to do to turn that off is to put the switch back. Right, so we're still hoping that at the end, when the race timer goes down to 0, it's just going to alert us that that timer has ended, so that we know that the race is over, bar the first yacht going over the finish line. So we'll pause it now until the timer gets down to the last 30 seconds or so.
20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Timer 2 elapsed.
Okay, so there you go. That's the sound we were looking for, and the race is still going, of course, until the winning boat crosses the finish line. And when that does, we just pull this trigger here, and the boat sails around in glory, having won another race.
12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Timer 2 elapsed.
Yeah. It's the first time that I've won a race and haven't felt guilty about it. Because I paid my penalties.
But you're way faster downwind than Dan, so it basically doesn't.
So that's how I did it. The challenge was set and rose to it. I love fooling around and learning new things about this radio, and there's so much more to learn. But at least now you know about logical switches, and if you're into yachting as well, then now you have a start timer to put on your radio as well.